Government Business Notice number 3, standing in the name of Mrs Hersey to present the Portable Long Service Leave Community Services Sector Repeal Bill 2025, Serial 18.
Minister.
Madam Speaker, I present a bill titled Portable Long Service Leave Community Services Sector Repeal Bill 2025, Serial 18 and table the explanatory statement. Madam Speaker, I move the bill be read a first time.
Continue.
Madam Speaker, I present a bill entitled the Portable Long Service Leave Community Services Sector Repeal Bill 2025. The purpose of this bill is to repeal the Portable Long Service Leave Community Services Sector Act 2024, herein referred to as the Act. The Act, which was introduced by the former Labor government in their dying days, was nothing more than a desperate attempt to woo voters, and in typical Labor fashion, their Portable Long Service Leave scheme was not properly budgeted for. It would have relied on a Treasury loan to cover its setup cost, which was estimated to blow out between $4 to $12 million, with no ongoing funding assigned for its operation once active. Madam Speaker, the opposition leader and her government had 8 years to make these changes while they were in government, but made them 3 months before an election. Now they are acting like saints, trying to claim the moral high ground, if only they did it properly in their time in government. With minimal consultation with industry and business, our CLP team strongly opposed the scheme in opposition, noting the community services sector consistently requested more detailed consultation about the proposed scheme, but this did not occur. The Act, which has not yet commenced, would have provided portability of long service leave entitlements to employees based on tenure within the community services sector, rather than relying on continuous employment with one single employer. Our government recognises the incredible and valuable contribution that our frontline workers provide to the Northern Territory. Repealing the Act does not mean the Territory Government does not value the services provided by employees within the community services sector. Its repeal will not affect employees' existing long service leave entitlements under Enterprise Agreements Awards or the Long Service Leave Act NT. As has always been the case, employees who remain with their employer will continue to be eligible for long service leave. The repeal will remove the additional financial, regulatory and administrative burdens on community service providers without the obligation to implement portability of long service leave. These employers can better focus on delivering essential frontline services. Businesses will instead be able to invest in growth, job creation, workforce development and service delivery to Territorians. We want to make the Territory a place where businesses want to come and operate, creating more job opportunities for people. We want people to move to the Territory knowing there are employment opportunities here for them. And we want people to stay and invest in the Territory. The scheme would have increased the cost for community services sector businesses operating in the Territory, including those delivering childcare, aged care, disability services, community mental health services, family and domestic violence and community legal services, and many of these services are not-for-profit. If the Labor Greens Unions coalition had their way, Territorians would have been forced to pay more for childcare at a time when they are already struggling to pay their bills. Madam Speaker, I'll quickly explain Business 101 for the opposition to take note of,
please.
And I hope they're listening. When the government forces cost increases on businesses, business pass those costs on to consumers. It really is that simple, Madam Speaker. Territorians would have the cost burden of this scheme on their shoulders. That's what we've heard from businesses and service providers through consultation, and that's what we heard loud and clear from local employers like Sarah Lloyd from Territory Childcare Group, who operated several daycares across Darwin. She said, and I quote, "The additional financial burden would have ultimately been passed on to families, which in the current economic climate would have placed even more pressures on families." On this side of the House, Madam Speaker, we would know that, of course, because we've got members with real-world experience and experience in business, so we understand and see the rationale behind repealing ill-thought-out schemes like these. But I'm not here to lecture the opposition, not that they'd understand basic economics. As a previous business owner of 25 years, I know very well the cost and process of doing business. Childcare centres all across the Territory told us the scheme would cost them $50,000 extra a year, a cost that would be passed on directly to parents in the form of increased fees. Madam Speaker, our government's priorities are clear. We are on this side of families raising their children here in the Territory, taking practical action to reduce the cost of living burden. The opposition, on the other hand, is not on the side of young Territory families, and they showed this in their ill-thought-out scheme. In addition to the direct financial cost to employers, the scheme would require employers to maintain detailed records for each employee, submit forms at the end of each quarter to an industry board. The scheme was to be funded by a wage-based levy imposed on sector employers, which actual estimates suggested would be in the order of $2,000 per employee each year. As such, the levy is similar to a payroll tax, but without any minimum wages threshold. Based on the estimated of 10,000 impacted employees, this would increase community service sector costs by around $20 million per annum. There is limited capacity within the sector to absorb these additional costs or pass them on in the form of higher charges. As such, they would either pass the cost on to the funders of service providers, mainly the Territory Government, or increase the cost of living for Territorians. For service providers unable to recover costs through increased charges or government funding, there is the potential that the levy will result in them curtailing services or withdrawing from the Territory market. Repealing the Act means the initial cost to government to establish and administer the scheme prior to its commencement will be removed, enabling our government to focus on our three key priorities to reduce crime, rebuild the economy and restore our lifestyle, and will ensure our businesses are not burdened with the additional financial, regulatory and administrative responsibility. I turn to the bill clauses. Clause 1 of the bill sets out its short title, the Portable Long Service Leave Community Services Sector Repeal Act 2025. Clause 2 provides for the Act to commence on the day after the day on which the Administrator's assent of this Act is declared. Clause 3 repeals the Portable Long Service Leave Community Service Act 2024. Clause 4 is a formal clause that provides for the Act to be repealed the day after it commences, having done its job of repealing the Portable Long Service Leave Community Services Sector Act 2024. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to commend this bill to honourable members and table a copy of the explanatory statement.
The question is that the bill be read a first time. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The Clerk.
A bill for an act to repeal the Portable Long Service Leave Community Services Act 2024.
Minister.
Madam Speaker, I move that the second reading of the bill be made an order of the day for the first Assembly meeting after 28 days have elapsed.
Member for Gwadja.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move the following amendment, that omit all words after that and insert the following words: that the bill be referred to the Legislative Scrutiny Committee for a report by the 20th of May 2025. Madam Speaker, speaking to that amendment, we have heard here this morning from the Minister the importance of talking and consulting, and the Minister has spoken about business, she's spoken about economics, but what she hasn't spoken about is about Territorians, about families, about people who will be greatly affected by this piece of legislation that she has brought in and is talking about today. And the fact that she is unwilling to send it to the Legislative Scrutiny Committee to enable an opportunity for the committee to have its deliberations, to have a hearing, to invite people to come and give testimony around this piece of legislation and around these changes. But not only that, she's completely dismissed the opportunity for Territorians to provide options to consider that may actually result in a better piece of legislation coming back to this Parliament. But we have heard the Minister, who doesn't care about working families, who doesn't care about hard-working Territorians, who we have absolutely heard that the portable long service leave for this sector is incredibly important because they work in industries where there is not often continuity of service and of funding. So they are often pushed to have to move to different organisations due to funding arrangements, due to wages, looking at trying to grow and develop and get a better wage for them and their families. And Madam Speaker, that has completely been ignored this morning by the Minister, who is only interested in protecting the big end of the Territory, big business, not the hard-working families in the Territory who absolutely are excited and were talking about finally being recognised in the portable long service leave provisions. Again, the Territory is no stranger to portable long service. We've done this in the construction industry. We've seen it work. It can work. Are there areas and opportunities for improvement? Probably. But again, that's where you take it to a committee and you enable the process for the committee to deliberate, to organise whether it's going to call for submissions, whether it's going to have a public hearing, to hear from the community services organisations, to hear from Territory families who might work in childcare, who might have family members who work in childcare, who might have family members who work for one of our DV organisations, who this scheme afforded the opportunity to actually, for the first time, have portable long service afforded to them, or the disability sector. But again, that has been ignored by the Minister, who is completely out of touch with working families and the aspiration for families to have portable long service leave. Completely ignored. I move the amendment that this be referred to the committee to enable the committee to meet, to discuss the options and to enable Territorians to actually have a say on this important piece of legislation that will affect thousands of Territorians. I move the amendment, Madam Speaker.
Member for Nightcliff.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I stand in support of this amendment, and I just want to explain to the House my thinking. And look, I know it's easy to come and stand up here and say, you know, I feel like the opposite side of the House is just working for big business. They don't care about struggling workers. But I'm going to step back and come at this from a side of acting in good faith, right? I know that we genuinely in this House want to make things better for people in the Territory. Now, the issue that we keep hearing is that this is going to cost childcare centres more. But don't punish the workers because you're saying it's going to cost childcare more. If it's going to cost childcare more, fix the issue with childcare, right? Don't punish the workers for an issue with expensive childcare. And obviously it's not just childcare, it's aged care workers, it's disability care workers. And I'd like to speak to the backbenchers and everyone else in the room to think about your electorates. So when this the media release came out, I sat down at my local daycare centre and spoke to the daycare workers that I've been dropping my kids off to every day for 6 years now. They were so devastated. Now, these are mostly women, lots of migrant workers, and the thing that many on the other side might not realise if you haven't thought about this issue much is, for example, if you're a migrant worker and you come here to work in the services sector, right? You don't often get a choice about where you work. So you might work somewhere for 4 or 5 years. If that centre doesn't offer the chance to for your visa, sorry, I've forgotten the term now, to sponsor you, sorry, for your visa, all of a sudden you have to up and move to a new childcare centre that's totally out of your control. So you might have worked somewhere for 5 years, you have to move somewhere new, and they're losing that ability to keep their long service. So this is really about, in a cost of living crisis, some of us lowly paid workers, mostly women, lots of migrant women who for no fault through their own are in a very insecure workplace and they have to move place to place. So that's what that portable long service leave is for, is to recognise that fact. Now this exists in other jurisdictions. Queensland has it. We have it in the building industry. If we can afford it for builders, we should be able to afford it for our most lowly paid vulnerable workers. We have it for nurses and midwives. When they come into state, they get to carry their long service leave over to the Territory. So this is something that we absolutely can do. It's quite frankly not good enough to just throw up our hands and say, the business sector told us it's going to cost us too much. Well, you know what? We're a government for a reason. Let's go, okay, why is that costing you too much? What can we do to enable that we have cheaper childcare and support our most lowly paid workers? We can do both. So this is why I'd like this to go to the scrutiny committee, because I feel like there are a lot of issues here that haven't been fleshed out, that haven't been examined. And if it goes before a scrutiny committee, we can actually say that we're doing our best to look through all the options possible to make sure we're not absolutely shafting some of our most essential workers. The other point I'll make is, and people in the sector have told me this already, all we're doing is stopping us from being able to recruit interstate members. If someone's looking to move interstate, they're going to look at, I moved to Queensland, I get to keep my long service leave. I move to the Territory, I don't. Say I move to Alice Springs and in a few years I want to head up to Darwin or to Tennant Creek or wherever. I don't get to keep my long service leave. It's a massive disincentive for people moving around and coming to the Territory. So this is why I implore you in an act of good faith, please put this before a scrutiny committee to rethink this fairly poorly thought out through bill and go speak to the workers in your sector. They are also suffering a cost of living crisis. We should not be shafting them because business owners have told us it's going to cost them more. Great, let's figure out a way to support childcare if that is the issue and it indeed is going to cost us more. What can we do to solve that issue whilst not completely throwing these workers under the bus? We have such an issue here in the Territory with retaining workers, attracting workers. We talk all the time about retaining and growing our population. Disability care workers, aged care workers, childcare workers are some of the most essential workers for our functioning society. My kids are there every day. I talk to the childcare workers every single day when I drop my kids off. Please don't throw them under the bus. Please think about their quality of life, their ability to have the best job. This exists in other places. There is no reason why we can't have it here, just because. And look, this is the reason why people get frustrated with the two-party system. One party gets in and goes, we want to throw everything out, the other party did. It's not thought through. Please think of the workers. Please send this to scrutiny committee. Thank you.
Member for Braidley, were you standing to speak before? Sorry, okay. Opposition Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise to support this amendment by the member for Goyja. We know that the CLP government celebrated the return of the scrutiny committee. Obviously, we saw late last night / early this morning that they don't actually support their own committee members when it comes to amendments and committee reports. But besides that fact, Madam Speaker, this is quite I really actually probably shouldn't be surprised. We've seen this morning alone, Madam Speaker, 2 of the 3 introductions of bills by the CLP government have been referred to the scrutiny committee. I find it quite concerning that the member for Katherine, as the responsible minister for this piece of legislation, is not looking at that open and transparent and fair and equitable process of the scrutiny committee to allow, as the member for Goyja and the member for Nightcliff have both articulated, to allow Territorians, to allow affected people, workers, business owners, industry, to have their say on this legislation that will affect, Madam Speaker, 10,000 plus Territory workers. I find it quite outstanding, and not outstanding in a good way, Madam Speaker, quite outstanding that the minister, the member for Katherine, refuses to send her legislation, the repeal bill, to this very important scrutiny committee, this very important process that the CLP celebrated in returning to the 15th Legislative Assembly with their government. And they literally pick and choose, Madam Speaker, what should be scrutinised with their own legislation and what shouldn't be. We've heard the Attorney-General this morning say, oh, these are, minor amendments. It's an omnibus bill. I've never seen an omnibus bill referred to scrutiny committee ever in, the 8 years that I've been a member of Parliament, or 9 years nearly. So it's quite, yes, we did have scrutiny committees at the start. Obviously, none of them over there were actually part of that 13th Legislative Assembly, so here they are barking up the tree. But yes, we did have scrutiny committees, and omnibus bills were never sent to the scrutiny committee, Madam Speaker. So whilst they try and be genuine and say, oh yes, look at us, we're open and transparent. Oh, but actually, by the way, the big bills that actually affect hundreds and thousands in this case of Territorians, we're just going to put that one to the side, wait for the 6 weeks until the next sitting, and then we're going to pass it. So I find it quite concerning that the CLP government sits in this chamber, the House of the people of the Northern Territory, and they are two-faced in their approach to scrutiny, picking and choosing how they want to be scrutinised. I find it absolutely flabbergasted by this particular move. It is a process of Parliament that the CLP government has reinstalled, and we welcome that. We welcome that from the start, Madam Speaker. We continue to celebrate the importance of scrutiny of government. Doesn't matter who's in government, the scrutiny of government by all factions of our communities is important. It's part of the democratic process, Madam Speaker. It's part of democracy. We're in the Westminster system, Madam Speaker. We all know that. So why is the CLP government picking and choosing at their convenience what should be scrutinised, what affects thousands of Territorians day in and day out to have their say in legislation? Remember, we're lawmakers in this place. Yeah, we have politics and back and forth, but ultimately the laws and the legislation that is passed in the Northern Territory Parliament is how the Territory then is governed. That is a huge responsibility, Madam Speaker, and it deserves the respect of the processes of the Westminster system, and particularly the sessional orders and the processes that have been installed by the CLP government for the 15th Legislative Assembly to then reflect the needs, the wants, the aspirations of the Territorians who we all represent. So I absolutely support this amendment, Madam Speaker. I think it is a bill that definitely needs to have the public input, feedback and scrutiny through this committee process. And once again, we see the CLP sitting back, thinking that it's okay to blindside Territorians, the reason they're in government, and just march on without any care whatsoever of what decisions they make and how it affects Territorians.
Leader of Government Business.
And I rise to speak in response to this proposed amendment by the member for Gwaja regarding the Portable Long Service Leave Community Services Sector Repeal Bill 2025 Serial 18. Madam Speaker, it's a bit rich coming from Labor when we talk about scrutiny committees because, as we just heard from the Leader of the Opposition, she said that she's never seen omnibus legislation sent to scrutiny. And let me just remind the House the reasons why. Because in 2020, the Labor government, which the Leader of the Opposition was part of, actually scrapped scrutiny committees. So to say that she's never seen that taken to a scrutiny committee, the reason is because there was no scrutiny committee. There was no scrutiny committee between 2020 and 2024.
Minister, take your seat.
That's why she's never seen it.
Take your seat, please, Minister. What's your point of order?
Standing Order 38, the member for Barkly is misleading the Parliament. I said I've been a member for 9 years and we did have scrutiny committees 4 years before that, before you entered Parliament,
Okay.
member for Barkly, with your 5-vote win.
Okay, so I'm just going to reflect just from my own curiosity. Irrelevance or tedious repetition is Standing Order 38. I'm not sure you got that number right, Leader of the Opposition, but I take your point, but the Minister has the call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I was talking about the period between 2020 and 24 because this is what the Leader of Opposition doesn't want us to talk about, because she was part of that government that scrapped the scrutiny committee back in 2020, and there was no scrutiny committees between 2020 and 24. Madam Speaker, the legislation that we're talking about today was introduced by the former Labor government in their dying days. That's the reality of this bit of legislation, Madam Speaker. Labor introduced it in the dying days of their government, trying to woo voters. There was no plan to actually introduce the legislation. I suspect that they probably had the same information that we have, and that they would have had to rely on a Treasury loan to cover its set-up costs, which we've estimated between $4 and $12 million. I suspect Labor was in possession of that same information. That's why they never did anything to introduce and they introduced the legislation, but it sat on the table and they failed to implement it, simply because of the costs involved. What we have been told is that childcare centres across the territory have told us the scheme will cost an extra $50,000 extra a year, and that cost would be directly passed on to parents in the form of increased fees. So these are the issues, Madam Speaker. This is a repeal bill that Labor and the opposition over there can carry on about this and go on about it. The reason it's going on the table for 28 days and it'll be debated at the next Parliament.
Silence, please.
What they're actually asking for is this to go to scrutiny so somebody else can do their work. What they're asking for is somebody else to do the work that they should be doing. This is an opportunity for every member in this House to get out and talk to your constituents. Stop abrogating your responsibility. Stop arguing that it should go to a scrutiny committee because you just don't want to do your job. Get out there and find out for yourself. You'll be told exactly what we've been told, that the cost of implementing this will be $50,000 for childcare. That'll be passed on to consumers. You knew that would have cost between $4 and $12 million to actually implement this legislation.
Member for Goyder, you have a point of order. I can guess what it is.
Point of order number 20, and I've got the correct number. No interruption of debate. I would love to hear what the member for Berkeley is saying, and we could have some respect in this chamber. It would be lovely.
After the experience we all had last night leaving here at around 1:30, it's a bit early in the day for me to warn people. So, Opposition Leader, I know you feel passionate about it, but please listen to the Minister in silence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I noticed that the clock continued there, so I think
we'll give you
about
another minute or so.
Another minute or so. I think I was just getting to the fact that, just to remind the House that Labor did nothing. They introduced the legislation, did nothing to implement it because they knew, as well as what we do, that this would have cost somewhere between $4 and $12 million to actually implement. And an impost, yeah, exactly, and an impost of $20 million on the sector. But as I was saying, 28 days, next Parliament, it's an opportunity for each member here to go out and talk to the sector, find out for yourselves about what the sector is saying about this. Come back to the House. There will be a debate about this legislation when it comes up for debate at the next Parliament. That's your opportunity to have a say about it. Scrutiny is not going to deliver what you expect because this is a repeal bill. It's not about suggesting changes. This is a straight-out repeal of legislation that will be in the House at our next Parliament. Speak to your constituents, bring the feedback back, and we'll discuss it then. Madam Speaker.
Silence.
Madam Speaker, you can tell that they're upset about this. They know that they've been caught out. They know that bringing in this legislation 3 months before an election without any funding to support it, they know that they've been caught out. That's why they're angry. Madam Speaker, we do not support the legislation. We won't be supporting that amendment. And I think, Madam Speaker, all I'm hearing is the Leader for Opposition constantly interjecting. Madam Speaker, in closing, we do not support the amendment.
Member for Johnston.
Thank you, Madam
You will
Speaker.
be heard in silence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also support this amendment. I understand the purpose of the Scrutiny Committee is to look at whether bills have sufficient regard to the rights and liberties of individuals. I think this is a bill that clearly there's a lot of community interest in and concern about. I think it's absolutely the job of the Scrutiny Committee to look at that. That doesn't in any way take away from us as elected representatives going and talking to our constituents. That is our job. I agree, Member for Berkeley. However, the job of the Scrutiny Committee is something further than that. I strongly support this piece of legislation going to the Scrutiny Committee so that we can do our job of trying to make the best law that we can here in the Northern Territory for all the people here. Thank you.
The question is that the amendment be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the noes have it. Division. A division is called. Gee, we haven't had one of those for a while, have we? the division is 7 ayes and 17 noes. The amendment is defeated. The question is now, I'll allow you to return to your seats. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it.